Hey, everybody, it's the Rugby Rant episode 222. I can't believe we've done this 222 times and are still doing it, haven't killed each other. I'm the big guy, Scott Ferrara. That's Rob the Hammer Hammerschmidt. And we are joined today by Hounds forwards coach Todd Dammers. Coach, how are you today?
Very well, guys. How are you?
Doing good. Can't complain. You know, it's always fun trying to put everything together. You're down in Australia. So you have a nice, sunny, bright day. I'm here in New York, so it's, dark out. It's always fun.
Yeah, I wish I was going into the summer months they are in Australia, but, it is what it is. I'm not big on the winter weather here.
I've been chasing the beach a little bit, having been in the Chicago winter, so it's nice to be back home on an Australian beach for a little while.
Soak it up while you can, Coach. Soak it up while you can. When you arrive sometime in January, February-ish, it's not going to be so nice.
No, it's going to be cold and dark, but that's okay. I like it.
That's awesome. And we're actually going to be talking about what are we talking about, Rob? Kind of like a recap of the Women's World Cup, correct?
Yeah, recap of the Women's World Cup, just our take on the success of the event, not only on the field, but off the field as well. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to be talking as a connection piece, what we believe could be done to better prepare the United States for hosting in 2031 and 2033. There's been a lot of discussion around the injection of money, and a lot of people have their ideas, and I'm pretty sure that Coach Dammers has some pretty good ideas, having lived in Australia, coached in Australia, and experienced World Cups from at the firsthand level. So Absolutely. We're interested to hear his thoughts.
Sure, but before we get to that, as we always do, we're going to hit our Around the Pitch. Coach, it's all yours. Take it away.
So just from an Australian point of view, I think it's obviously been reported today in the last couple of days that R360, that new concept and model, is going to hit a few hurdles, like in a lot of the major playing nations. But I know that Australia's come out quite strongly about it today. No Rugby World Cup participation or Olympic participation if you decide to go down that pathway and sign a contract with R360. So that's got big ramifications, obviously, for that competition, but also for the game domestically and internationally in Australia. So it's, depending on what side of the fence you sit on, it's big news, and I think it probably puts a big dent in that R360 concept, not being able to get the best possible players heading into a World Cup cycle.
Absolutely. I wonder if the rest of the Tier 1 nations are going to go with that plan too, and kind of bring that out and say, hey, if you're signing a contract with them, you're not signing a contract to play internationally. I think they've already burned a few bridges trying to do this R360 thing for a while now. So that doesn't surprise me, Hammer. I don't know if it surprises you.
Yeah, Coach, what are your thoughts on the R360? I mean, is this decision by the Australian Rugby Union and some of the others as well, is that just the old heads talking, or is this just smart heads talking, people that know and understand the game, the complexities, are making a good decision for rugby as a whole?
Yeah, I think ultimately, for me, I still believe in tribalism. I still believe in getting behind your local team and what have you. I don't think, for me, I might be getting a bit old, but that never changes for me. Like, I understand the concept, and I think there's really cool scope for it. Like, if you're looking at it glass half full, say for Australian point of view, Fraser McRae, Harry Wilson, or what have you, go off and get $3 million, and then we're still playing for the Wallabies. There's an argument that says that gives someone else in the pathway an opportunity, but then our local product diminishes, and then sponsorship diminishes, etc., etc. So I'm a traditionalist. There's no doubt about it, or a purist, or whatever you. I would much prefer to see Super Rugby doing really well, the English Prem doing really, really well, than a travelling roadshow. But that's me. I think the players would enjoy $3 or $4 million a year. There's no doubt about that. But do I get behind a Grand Prix style circuit? Probably not. I like to see guys in our community involved, and I think that's the big part. Like I saw something with Artie Sarvia running hills the other day in Wellington.
Right.
That's what our game's based on.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, I think we're having to bring Coach on and maybe do a deep dive into R360 later on. But let's get to your around the pitch and get Coach out of here in a quick time.
Yeah, well, I love this. News came out this week that Barbie will release 4 female rugby girls, if you will: Alona Mar, Portia Woodman, Wycliffe, Nasira Condi, and one of my favorites, Ellie Kildoon from England. They're all going to be basically represented as Barbie, strong women. They're going to be more muscular, as you can see by the photo there with Alona. You're going to be able to purchase them here in America in 2026. It's a shame they left somebody like Sophie de Goody out, but I think there was a marketing strategy behind the women and the countries from which they were picked. I'm a little concerned with Alona's, only in that she's that lady that became known because she's a strong woman. She's 5'10", 200. She's, not your typical body, especially for a model or a swimsuit model. And she's made a lot of, I think she's got a lot of support from that. And if you look at this figure, while muscular, it certainly doesn't look like Alona Mar. It is not a true rugby female. I would have liked to have seen her better represented than that. That's same holds true if they would have had a Sophie de Goody. That being said, I might just buy one to go along with my collection over here. I've got Christian Cullen, but I have 2 more up in Preston's room. So I've got a pretty good collection of rugby dolls, rugby merchandise, rugby, whatever you want to call it, collectibles. There we go, collectibles, rugby collectibles. I love them, and they're going for like $100 each. So who knows? She could be a trendsetter.
Listen, the only dig I have on the whole thing, dude, she plays hooker in sevens. She shouldn't be wearing the 2 spot. I'm just saying, like, she's not. You're playing. If you're the hooker in sevens, you can't realistically actually have your action figure wearing the 2. Like, let's just, let's be real.
Yeah.
You think Portia's wearing whatever she wears? Well, I mean, she's still a back in sevens, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, I know she plays hooker in sevens, but hookers, like, I certified front row. They don't really do anything in sevens.
What was funny is somebody complained, like, why isn't she wearing an Eagles jersey? I'm like, because of copyright and like negotiations with USAR. That'd be my guess. They get away with it.
Some people don't have the common sense for it, but
yeah.
No. So I'm probably gonna get one too, just to say I got one. I have a lot of memorabilia. I think it's gonna be something cool. Again, I just wish they gave her the 11 or the 14, but it is what it is. That's just me nitpicking. That's what I'm gonna nitpick. But I'm gonna share a picture now of our buddy Adam Hughes, who wrote for the Rugby Rant, and then the Grand Poobah, Mike Parazzini, with us. And Adam Hughes did a live reading of his book of poetry. This is his 5th book. It's called Pluck. It's out now. You can get a signed copy for, I think, $20. You can get a regular copy for like $10. It's a great book of poetry. I was so happy that I listened to him read it before I started reading the book. And, it's good that rugby players are support rugby players. At the time of this recording, he's up in Boston with his family doing a reading and kind of just visiting Salem, for the spooky season and stuff. And he got to experience Sleepy Hollow. We were at Sleepy Hollow with the Hudson Valley Writers Center. And, me being born around here, the Legends of Sleepy Hollow in Washington Irving, one of the things you definitely need to go do when you're in Sleepy Hollow is go to the cemetery. There's a veteran of every American war buried in that cemetery. Washington Irving, Andrew Carnegie, Leona Helmsley, who famously Cruella de Vil, the 101 Dalmatians, is based off of her, and her mausoleum is insane, guys. It has, she was obviously rich. It has the skyline of New York across it in this crazy stained glass that is probably worth more than my house. And Rockefellers are there. It's a very interesting cemetery. They have guided tours, and it's fun to go on. But shout out to Adam Hughes, who fellow rugby player, and it was great to Rob. It's one of those things I got to meet him in person. So I don't get to meet many guys in person, and it was great.
Yeah, every once in a while your wife lets you out of the house. But hey, let's not forget that Adam wrote a book, This is Rugby. It's a story, culture, and future of American rugby. It has some great stories. It's great because you can pick it up and read any section at any time. You don't have to read it sequentially from front to back. You could just, kind of pick it up wherever you want. You can leave it go, and then you can pick it back up later on. You haven't really lost anything. It's an awesome book. I've really enjoyed reading it.
It's funny that book because obviously he mentioned that book and it was mentioned in his intro. And then when I was speaking to Adam, he said, the one note Hammer gave me was, how come you didn't talk about the Chicago Blaze?
Yeah, I did. But he gave me an answer. He said, hey, look, I contacted them. They didn't contact me back. I said, mate, you spoke to the wrong person.
Yeah, so. No, he had to bust his chops. He had to take his time.
I had an idea for him that he needs to go and we could do a traveling tour and visit rugby, rugby pitches around the United States and do like a picture book. It'd be like a coffee table book.
That's great. I'll take him to Randall's Island. He can get almost stabbed on the bus as we go there. It'll be fun. That's how around the pitch.
Him and Mark Sanchez.
Yeah. Well, don't even get me started with that. It's funny because Jim Hamilton did that whole series in following Ben Foden, and he was on the bus. They took the bus to Randall's Island, and in some behind the scenes footage that we saw. We got to see, luckily that wasn't published. He was truly scared to be on that bus. Now, I don't know how Jim Hamilton grew up in the UK, like what area he grew up in, but I was like, yo, this is normal, bro. I was doing this when I was like in sixth
Hamilton's
grade.
like 6'6" or something stupid like that. He's not
and
a
you're
small
on the bus.
man.
Half the bus was the rugby players, like if anything was going to happen, But it was interesting. But anyway, like we said, we're going to do a little recap of Women's World Cup, and we're going to talk about how that transitions into Rugby World Cup in 2031. So get ready for our Rugby Rant. I think the big thing for this year's Rugby World Cup, or this past Rugby World Cup for me, was I didn't have to dig to find the matches I wanted to watch. And I'm talking, and I've talked about this on multiple episodes when I'm talking 09, 07, having to spend $70 to watch one match on Setanta Sports, and it was a pool match. Like I didn't even, I was looking to watch the Eagles. So obviously they're not making it into, the quarterfinals at this point, back then. So I'd pay $70 American on my parents' credit card to watch a pool match online, and then you'd have like a replay of it for 24 hours in case you missed it, depending on where it was. And now, it's everywhere, and especially the Eagles. The Eagles' accessibility has grown. So for me, it was so easy to watch matches and watch replays of matches. I have two kids, so sometimes the live wasn't what I could do, and it boggles my mind that we didn't do this before for men's and women's rugby.
Todd, I got to ask you, you were in Australia as the United States was playing Australia in that pool play match. One of the best matches, arguably, of the entire tournament. Turned out to be a tie, and really, it came down to point differential. Australia getting through to the knockout phase, the United States being knocked out. How was that match received in Australia, knowing that in 4 years' time, the women are going to be playing down under?
Yeah, it was a really good match. Like I probably had a foot in both camps, obviously working now in the United States, and but I also know Sione Fukuoka quite well. He played at my club in Brisbane, and we used to coach against each other and whatnot. So, and I just know Sione's like one of the best men you'll ever meet. So I sort of had a little bit of a foot in both camps. So the draw probably worked out quite nicely, especially when Australia pushes through to the quarterfinal. But like for us, I would say to you again, like just outside of that game, because I thought that game was excellent, and probably the most women's rugby I've watched, like I guess saturation-wise. Like I was watching a lot of women's rugby. I've got an 11-year-old son, and we were sitting down and watching it quite a bit. And I think for him, he enjoyed it a lot because, like, the quality of the football was excellent, but it was the speed of the game was just a touch slower for him to watch and be able to pick things up and to see it. But that doesn't diminish from the quality. It's just because the quality of football was actually excellent. I loved watching Canada play. I thought their breakdown speed and some of the things that they did was just unbelievable. But I could watch every single game of the World Cup. We've got an online platform down here. It's called Stan TV, and it's got all rugby. But we could see every single game of the World Cup on demand. So basically, didn't have to pay extra. It was just part of our sports package, and we could just pick and choose. So the accessibility for us was huge. It was amazing. So. I just think that the quality of the games and what it has been in the past, it was a rocket ship by comparison in terms of quality of years gone by. And I think, teams like Australia and New Zealand, who are traditional powerhouses of rugby, not so much women's rugby, but the Kiwis are, we're behind. And I think that's a great thing. Watching Canada in a World Cup final is, amazing. I was really rooting for Canada. Being Australian, we don't like to see England win too much. But the way they played and the accessibility, it was, I think, getting a packed house for the final was absolutely, it's a tick. It should have got a packed house. I think that's absolutely, it was unreal. We loved it, in my house in particular.
It's go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
Well, I was going to ask, it's a record-setting crowd, certainly for women's rugby, and it damn near eclipsed, I think, the 2004 World Cup final that had 62,000. So it was real close in terms of pure numbers there. I guess my question is more about, was that a result because it was in England and England was in the final, or is it a sign of what's to come for world rugby in the larger landscape? What do you guys think?
Personally, I think it was a little bit of both, if I'm being honest. I think England knew they had a really good opportunity to make the final. So I think it was a sellout that crowd was a sellout for quite some time. But I would say to you that going into the next World Cup in Australia, I think it'll be bigger again. I honestly do. I think women's rugby, there'll be no issue with selling out crowds in Australia. I can guarantee you that. I watched the women's rugby league final on Sunday, and there was 50,000 people there just to watch that game before the men's. But if you had to play that as a standalone, it would have sold just as many. I think you're starting to see a real trend in young girls and even young boys, knowing more and more about both sides of the code.
Absolutely, I agree. I think it was a little bit of both, and I think that the UK being that middle point, for travel helps that out a lot. You know, it's good for North America. It's good for you guys down under to get up there with your 8 weeks of vacation or whatever work gives you guys down there in those cockamamie countries. No, but seriously, I think it really was both, and I think you had a lot of people there who thought their teams were going to be in the semifinals and stayed for the week and made a thing of it and kept their finals tickets to go and watch it. Interestingly, Coach, I forgot who told me, but somebody compared the women's rugby World Cup this year to watching collegiate football in the States, where the parity is kind of wide, right? It's not tight, but when you're watching some of these games, it's a little bit less clinical and a little bit more fun and a little bit of mistakes thrown in there and an odd bounce or two to make it more exciting. And again, you're right. I think the actual game itself is really up there as far as watching the game. It's not like you're going out there watching Division 4 in America. But because you have those little nuances of maybe they're just the pass is a little off a little bit. There's a mistake, and all of a sudden there's an interception going the other way. It's a little more exciting. So, well,
interestingly enough, and this is just it's sort of involved. I think you're 100% correct. I think there's a little bit more. There's a little bit less caution there. So as you get higher in the men's game, risk mitigation becomes part and parcel of your coaching. So you're trying to lessen the risk. But in the women's game, they're playing pure footy. In my opinion, they're playing, if there's a mistake, that's okay. We'll keep moving forward. So there's less of that risk mitigation. But I spoke to a really famous Australian cricket coach, and he's one of the best cricket coaches ever, but he's quite an innovative guy. He said if he was in charge of women's rugby and even the AFL down here, he reduced the ball size just one size, and that just gives it more control. Like the ball can be kicked as well. Like, and
I was
there's
going to say better kicking.
just things. Yeah, better kicking, better handling, because the ball is like ladies' hands traditionally have been a little bit smaller than men's, and so that ability to then control the ball and be, I guess, more powerful, more accurate becomes part of it. I genuinely think that it will increase what is already a pretty incredible product.
Me too. The only thing I had a criticism of, and to me it was the pitch itself, because we were seeing a lot of resets on the scrums.
Yeah.
And and I understand the officials speaking to the front rows, they're doing what they're supposed to do. But I mean, in going and watching a lot of replays of why the scrums were going down, it was legitimately because the pitch was super, super saturated. Like,
yeah.
And I don't know, even when they moved it, they were still having an issue of holding the weight. And again, I don't know how you fix that necessarily. It's just kind of, it is what it is. But I also felt like sometimes the referee is giving the instructions, like, did you really have to give an instruction there, or just reset it, move over and reset? Like, to me, it was they were kind of overthinking what was going on.
I think there'd also be a conversation around power imbalance. Like, some of the teams are like full-time athletes and really strong and powerful, and some of them are semi-professional, etc. So I think also it'd be a combination of the three factors of probably environment, maybe instruction, and also just the athleticism or the difference in preparation.
Definitely. Yeah, you could see that, because that parity in the front row sometimes is not there, especially with body size.
Yeah, correct.
Well, it's interesting, Coach. You talked about that just little tick slower, and that factor made it helpful for your son to be able to pick up on some of the nuances. And for me, I think that tick slower, what it did for me is it elevated the play of those players who are just a slight step above everybody else. And so I'll throw out three names that to me really stood out, particularly as we looked at that final, but throughout the tournament. Obviously, Kildoon. I mean, she stood out to me far and away one of the best, if not the best player in the tournament. Her ability to accelerate, her ability to find space, her ability to find those half gaps and make something of them was so incredibly exciting for me. And then you got the power of a Hannah Botterman, who just demonstrated her skill in the front row and her power and her ability over the ball and a jackal on many different occasions, particularly in that final, to change momentum of the game. And then, of course, there was also Asia Hogan Rochester, who, again, one of those explosive players who found edges, who found that space on the wing and really made. I mean, she, I think, scored two tries in the final match. I mean, and then Sophie DeGoody, obviously, who, player of the year, rugby player of the year, just an amazing talent. But when you have accelerated talent like that, and you've got those smaller, those margins of timing that are a little bit slower in step than the men's game, it makes those women and their ability to display their prowess that much better. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was beautiful. And I loved every minute of this tournament.
Me too. Here's the thing. I will hold on, Coach. Let me just get into Rob on this one. I would contend Hope Rogers had a better tournament than Hannah. Hope Rogers scored. She did what she needed to do in the front row. She did what she needed to do at the breakdown, and she was scoring plays. And I love Alona Marr, but Hope Rogers was a frigging beast this tournament. The most capped woman for the USA Eagles now. And I wish there was a little bit more camera on Hope and showing, like, don't get me wrong. It's, Alona built it, right? But I want to show what in America, what the props look like. And the fact that you can grab the ball. She scored one from like 40 meters out too. It wasn't just like, she's picking them up at the 5 meter line, So, she was showing every aspect of athleticism you want to forward to really show. And I understand, from the English side, you're going to show Hannah a lot because England, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm not like, that's how it is. But man, I just think Hope Rogers is severely underrated in some of these. So I'm just going to push back on Hannah. Not that I think she's great and I think she did well, but I would just push back on everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all I was going to throw to is I think the thing that I probably like about the women's game currently is it actually does showcase genuine different body shapes. Like the men's game, like a little bit, athleticism is becoming like it's becoming closer and closer together. Like you've got hookers who are as fast as backs and second rowers and all those things. There's height, but the difference in athleticism then highlights your foot speed, but also then your strong, powerful front rowers are actually getting more pay because probably maybe some body sizes are a little bit smaller. And I think the exciting thing about that is that like having a daughter who admittedly doesn't play rugby, she rows, but watches a whole heap of sport is girls can then start to see, oh, that's my shape, or hey, I've got a home in a game like this. And I think sometimes in the men's game at the moment, our athleticism's got to such a point, like equally, that it doesn't highlight each individual area's strength. And I think that to me was one of the things that came out of it. It was sort of back to like a little bit, yesteryear where, like your front rowers did what the front rowers do. And then when they were a bit more athletic, it stood out amazingly. Speed on the edges. Like, I loved it. I thought it was unreal. And I hope it shows to all the girls, not just in the US, but around, that you've got a home in this game. And I think that's the biggest part. And that's what I think will help it grow.
I mean, sorry, Rob, we got to jump in one more time. One of the coolest things I got the opportunity to see was this all-inclusive league in the UK where they have kids with disabilities and all different ages, and it's touch rugby, and they have a league just to get you involved. And I know a lot of the Prem teams and the women's teams, the PWR teams, are involved in those leagues. So it's great to see them coming back and bringing into the community to show that we are completely inclusive. Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, I was just on the back end of this conversation about the Women's World Cup. Here's the question as we start to forward think about the World Cup coming to American shores in, what is it, about 6 years' time on the men's side. Does America need to invest more into the women's game as a vehicle to engage more fans in the build-up to the World Cup here in the United States in 6 years' time? So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Unmistakably, yes. I think America needs to invest in thinking about development pathways as a total leading into the 2031 World Cup. But the women's game is a growth area. There's absolutely zero doubt about it. But also, it shows mums in particular, because they're a lot of the decision makers, that there's a game there for their daughters, but also their sons.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think right now the model that WER shows, it gives the perfect and this is really only happens, unfortunately, for the women's side. It gives the Eagles the perfect mix they want, because during the PWR season, the Eagles can go play in England and play that top-tier competition, hone their skill, iron sharpens iron, and then if they choose to, they can come back into WER, which is kind of in the off season of PWR at that point, and play domestically here at a level to bring the other women up with them. Right? We saw that with the MLR. Me and Rob had talked about it for years on how, you bring in a guy like, Ben Foden, right? And you bring him in and he teaches the guys that are transitioning from club rugby how to be professional. This is what you need to do. This is the work you need to put in it. This is why I eat what I eat, whatever. Because, let's be honest, even right now in MLR, that stuff hasn't been complete as you would see maybe in a pro football team, right? Where you have all these, top tier nutritionists and this, that, and the other thing. And there's this process of, you come into league and the senior guys show you, well, we have that portion, at least in the MLR. And I think you're going to have that in the WER. If we could just spread some of the women around. I know this year it was a little tough. A lot of them were, Boston Banshees had quite a few. Denver had quite a few, and that's just based upon where they're currently living. But I think as we get more Eagles involved in the team and more Eagles capped in that 15 squad, you're going to see them kind of transition and be a little more around the other WER matches. Unfortunately, I had season tickets to New York. I got about 3 matches in, and then we got our second son, and that just kind of threw a wrench into things. So I didn't get to go to the last 2, which I was so upset about. And then I want getting into a final and all that stuff. So I was upset I missed it. And I watch as much rugby I can, but when I was there, the crowds were growing. The product on the pitch was good. The officiating was good. It was just as good of a production as I've seen from MLR teams. So they have a leg up on that portion. At least they know from the production side what they can and can't do at most of these stadiums. So I think that gives them a leg up on the professional side. But yeah, we got to invest in the women's game. We got to invest in the youth program. That's where that money needs to go to.
And I think also, if you go, Matt, sorry.
No, go ahead, Coach.
I was just about to say, I think also and understanding what the best pathway from college football. I think college rugby is also a really good opportunity to build a really unique model that no one else in the world, if you get it right, has that flow of talent. Like no one.
Yeah, it's funny you say that.
We went to a campus. You go, mate. Sorry, I'm on a delay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's quite all right. I was just gonna say, I think you hit a perfect note there, Coach. What I was gonna say is I think there's three things that are important to the growth of the women's game that can really enhance the men's game. And that's number one, it's showing this away in the fact that it's an NCAA sport right now in the United States. So it's showing us a pathway to which women can be involved in this sport and still be an NCAA sport. The second thing is youth flag football, women's flag football is kicking our ass right now, particularly in Illinois. The great thing is at least in Illinois, the game of rugby at the high school level is a spring sport. So what a great opportunity to introduce contact sports, to go from flag football to a contact sport like rugby and remind girls that, here's a physical style of sport that you can participate in. That's a nice balance to football. And then finally, I really think what women do well, incredibly well, is the marketability piece in connection with commercialism, right? If Alona showed us anything, it's that women are brand loyal, right? So, she was a Maybelline user. She was I believe it was, there was a particular suntan lotion that she was fond of using. Obviously the personal items, they are brand loyal. And so there's an opportunity, I think, for the Eagles women to really dig into the brand loyalty and pave the way for men and commercialism that we can build upon. I think Coach Dammers will be talking about this as we start to flip the script and talk about 2031 in the United States. So those are three really positive things that we think we can use to build on the front end of going into the World Cup in 2031 in 6 years' time. Just
on the flag football thing, there's a really good model that you could that USA Rugby could look at if they were ever interested. Is the Rugby League, National Rugby League, pretty much paid for and bought and now own Touch Football Australia. And so then all of their participants become rugby league registered. And so that their uptake of young female touch football players into rugby league ranks has skyrocketed. And they're quite comparable games, but you can see, like you said, it's that progression from understanding the game, the catch, pass, the ball goes backwards, all those sort of things in rugby, in touch, but also that competitive sport into a collision sport. And I think that would be a really interesting model to start to look at from flag football into rugby as a pathway. There's no doubt about that. It's worked unbelievably in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. I think you're right. And here's the thing. I think from the men's side, people should Caleb Geiger should be doing a friggin' a thing for Copenhagen because the dude dips like crazy. You'll get the whole front row in for a Little Caesars pizza commercial. We could figure that out. I mean,
Matt Harmon, he's a perfect Little Caesars model.
That's what I'm saying. Jack Isacaro, could do Lucky Charms with his red hair. I don't know, but my point is, I think there's marketability there. We just need to find it. We need to find that. I mean, Am I wrong? Do we not talk about New England with the dude wipes on the butt, right?
100%.
Exactly. Right. So it's possible to do it. So we just need to do it on the men's national level. Yeah. So Rob, what's your next question about 2023, 2020?
So moving forward, it was interesting. News came out just 2 weeks ago, and everybody jumped the gun and assumed some things that I think they've got to be careful of. So the news was released that $250 million is going to be infused into the United States in preparation for the World Cups in 2031 and 2033. And it's coming from World Rugby. So the question is, what are the critical steps that need to be done in order to get those two World Cups right? And how we know most of this money is going to be consumed, about 200 million to be consumed to put on the tournaments. That's to, house teams and to prepare pitches and everything else. But there's going to still be $50,000 in it to help for development and prepare and lay the groundwork and development. So how do we best use all this money? How do we best prepare in 6 years' time? And I know that Coach Dammers has some pretty thoughtful ideas here.
Just give me 1 second. Hold on.
Coach is getting a parking ticket while trying to do the show here. But I think you're right. I think
sorry, no. Sorry, I was just trying to organise just to let someone know I'm going to drive somewhere, so that's fine. Just on like what we've spoken about, Rob, is I think there's got to be a multi-leveled approach to this, and it's got to be from your development pathways all the way up to MLR. But you've also got to be self-sustainable, and I think you've got to leverage that World Cup to start to, and back onto what we were talking about before, the marketability. How do we start to get this where we're just not reliant on MLR owners to pay their way, or the $250 million coming in that really isn't to prop the game up, it's actually to get America ready for a World Cup.
It's funny you mentioned that development all the way up to the MLR coach, because one of the things that I firmly believe that if we're going to spend the money wisely, let's just say it is whittled down to 30 million or 50 million for development and coaching and referees and player development, all that stuff. You're not going to be able to spread $50 million over and across 50 states, in my opinion. And people might not like to hear this, but there are going to be winners and losers. There's going to have to be a process by which we pick and choose where that money is being spent. And I think we got to be strategic in that thought process. So go to places where rugby is strong, top to bottom, from development all the way up to MLR. And yes, there are going to be, unfortunately, places that miss out if you use this model. But think about like Boston has a really strong programming all the way up, from youth. The Free Jacks has started it. They have great, Mystic River and on it, obviously, into the Free Jacks. The DMV area is super strong as well. The OGDC and the Young Glory 501c3 has done great things up and above the Eastern Seaboard out there. And then, of course, you've got some great, teams. Nova just won a Sevens national champion, Sevens national championship up into Old Glory, DC. So find these places, and that's where you start from a point of strength, start where the game is already strong, and really start to promote it there. And those will be the cities that you can see really making serious bids to host these World Cup matches.
And I think you've just nailed the last thing on the head. I think the other thing we need to do is talk to these cities and work out, right, you want to host Rugby World Cup games, finals, semi-finals, which we all know that this is going to be a bidding, like there'll be people who want these things because obviously from a tourism point of view, commerce, etc. Then they've also got to invest in the game. Yeah. And I firmly believe, and I've said this for a while, like even from an MLR standpoint, is we aren't leveraging enough rugby sponsorships to help drive the game. So I think I said to you the other day, Rob, just away from the podcast, like rugby, US rugby, world rugby, MLR need to sit together and say, how do we best leverage what is coming up to create a sustainable pathway and a sustainable strength within our game? There's going to be internal flight partners that are going to want to sponsor for a Rugby World Cup. There's going to be beverage sponsors. There's going to be all these sort of things. And I've said this for quite some time, is we should be going to World Rugby and saying, can you help us by saying, if you want to be part of this, then we need you to help to start to fund development opportunities like domestic rugby competitions, both men and female. And if you do that, then you will get first and last reply for the major sponsorship categories. Like there's so many things that we can do to lessen the burden on a few at the moment, as well as, like you said, really rewarding those cities and areas that have been rugby strongholds for a long, long time. Like I'll even looked at the Rugby Atlanta Prem the other day online and the way they're going about that. Now I hadn't seen that before, but that looks like an area where they've really got their their minds in order, and they're trying to build the game. Like, let's reward those things, and let's get those cities involved. Like, there's so many opportunities there, but we've got to be bold enough to leverage those.
Yeah, and the idea, building on that, getting some of those commercial partners, and again, I'll go back to one of my points with Young Glory and the Free Jacks Academy process. Say, okay, look, we want a 5-year commitment, and part of that commitment is we're gonna put your brand, your logo, we're gonna put connect all the dots we can to your company in these developmental pathways, in these programs. So your logo is going to be on every jersey. It's going to be on every pair of shorts. It's going to be on every t-shirt that we give out. It's going to be on, every website. It's going to be on every piece of social media.
Yeah.
We're going to put it out there, but we need you to make a commitment to support these developmental efforts for the next 6 years so that when we get to that time, your brand is strong, it's aligned with our brand, and we have a unified goal of promoting rugby in these areas.
Look, I think that we spoke about, like I sort of said this the other day to you, Rob, was that, like, say for argument's sake, McDonald's, for argument's sake, who obviously make a lot of money out of the American people, but there's also then the idea about active lifestyles and all of those type of things, is that rugby, like US rugby, should be speaking to them about being their major development partner, about developing and giving young boys and girls throughout the country the opportunity through junior programs and after school programs and all those type of things, the opportunity to be part of a game that keeps you fit, healthy, strong, not just physically but also mentally. And hey, everybody wears a McDonald's logo on the back of every pair of shorts in the United States. Like, to me, that's something that a thought-conscious company like McDonald's would be very, very much in part of their, I would say, their corporate governance and part of their corporate partnerships.
Absolutely. Coach, I know you got to go in a real quick. So just give us your final thoughts on what we could do to prep better for 2031.
Yeah, I think for us, like for me, I'm going to put on my MLR hat. We need a sustainable MLR. I think without question that feeds into a really strong Eagles, because at the end of the day, this is a competitive, like the US is a competitive market in terms of eyeballs on and corporate dollar and all those type of things. So success is always going to be a really big part of that. And in the short term, the greatest thing we can do is have a really, really strong MLR producing American players. And I say American players because I know there's a little bit of back and forth about Canadians and what have you. I think a strong Canada makes a strong US team, which makes a strong World Cup. I just look at our home, like where I live in Australia, like we've got a thing called State of Origin, pardon me, and it's in rugby league. And it is the 3 greatest games, in my opinion, in both codes. Like, it is unbelievable. Like, but it's marketed as state versus state, mate versus mate. And that's always been the way. And like for me, I look at the US-Canada game and go, why is there not a 3-test series like a Bledders like every year to have that? Like, it should be. And if there was 1 or 2 games in the middle of the MLR season, I'd be all for that, because then you've got like Lucas Rumble coming up against, like the Butcher, for argument's sake, and they're trying to tear each other's heads off. And then they've got to come back to training and kiss and make up. That's unbelievable. Like, I just think that, like, there's so many cool storylines and passion that then we start to see with that. So for me, it's very much about the full North America rather than just, I know there's not been a lot of talk around that, and I suspect there will be in the next couple of weeks. But a strong domestic competition, because the other thing is this, we can have as many development pathways as you like, and I see this in Australia, and that was my first job, was working in development for the Queensland Reds. You can have all these amazing development pathways and programs, but if you don't have anywhere to funnel those interested participants at that point, then you lose them to something else that they can grab a hold of. So for me, it's very much, we've got a really good product in MLR. We've got to maintain its strength, and we've then got to make sure that we're building from there. I think where the MLR can be a little bit bolder is they've got to go out and get sponsors. Like we should be called the Guinness MLR, or like the Heineken MLR. Like, get a naming rights sponsor. It takes pressure then off our owners to be the only financial contributor. Because I think that way then that money can be spent on, young American players being part of, programs, etc. And like you talked about before, nutrition and all those type of things at an MLR level. We're really lucky, and I've got to shout out to our nutritionist, Lauren. She's a gun. Like, the Hounds are really lucky. We're run as well as any Super Rugby franchise. Like, we're really lucky. Peter Burnick and Matt Satch, and our ownership group, and Phil Groves, they look after our team like a proper professional setup. We're so lucky. But we need to see that across the entire league, and I'm sure that they're getting towards that. But that's where that money can then start to develop pathways and better environments, and it does attract people to that. And I think the other side of that is, Hammer, we talked about this, is players being involved in D1 footy in the off season. That to me, I've started to watch a bit of the D1 footy. That to me is also a really big part of it, because again, you start to attract people to games, you start to attract people to the community of that is rugby, and because our players are a lot more accessible than any other professional sport in the United States.
Absolutely. Coach, thank you so much for being on the episode. We know you got a busy day today. Thank you for joining us, Coach.
I appreciate it, guys, and I can't wait to get home to Chicago, even though it's cold and what have you. But it looks like the Cubs have got Cubs are on a run, and I'm a true Chicagoan. The Bears might be on the march here, so you never know. So
Go Bears! Go Bears!
Go Bears!
All right,
we'll see you in a few months' time, Coach.
Thanks, guys. Talk soon.
All right.
So, Scott, I want to talk about what.
Well, real quick, just because there was a couple points I wanted to make, but I wanted to give Coach his time because I knew he was leaving.
Sure.
He was talking about the women's collegiate pathway, and you were talking about Division I. And I think you see a lot of women's Eagles coming out of Penn State, and the reason being, we talked about this multiple times with the MLR guys. They have a legit program set up professionally. We spoke about it with our buddy Robert Rescue, several times, where he was like, "You don't understand what we did at Penn State and the way we did it set us up for that."
It's a high performance pathway.
Exactly. So I think, if I was USA Rugby, I would be going to places like Penn State and saying, draw this up for us so that we can advise other colleges on how to do it. And again, is that giving away their competitive advantage? Maybe, but also, is it better for rugby overall? And the second thing I want to talk about is we need to have USA Rugby and World Rugby and MLR ownership talking already about where we want the final. Don't get me wrong, I'd love the final at Giant Stadium because it's an hour for me. But let's be realistic. You're talking about OGDC. Guess who's having a new stadium built in the next 2 or 3 years? Right in time for a
Chicago Bears.
No, the Redskins. Or the Commanders now. My point is, you want to talk about hooking it up with you. You gave OGs all this stuff about how they kind of hit all the marks. Well, now's the time you have to get in and say, we want the Rugby World Cup final there. You know what I mean? Right. Get it in their heads now, so that way when they're coming out with scheduling and things like that, you're already on their radar. And make sure you have World Rugby associated with it, because I love Paul and Chris and everybody, but don't know if the Commanders organization is going to listen to them, but the organization of World Rugby, maybe they'll get a meeting about it. You know what I mean? So, because let's be honest, we need it to be near a hub. DC is between New York and Atlanta, the two biggest international hubs on the East Coast.
2 hours from Philly.
If it's going to be in LA, they have events over at the Coliseum, but I think the Coliseum only holds 62 or 63, maybe. I have to double check that. I could be absolutely wrong. Let me double check that statement. Anyway, you can continue.
No, I don't think it's a bad idea to actually be more strategic in planning out all your knockout stages where those matches are going to be held.
77,000. So my point being, we had 81,000 for the women's this year.
Right.
So we're going to want in the upper 80s. Honestly, I'd love to have it at Michigan Stadium, have 107,000 people rocking, or have it at Bristol Motor Speedway. They put 150 people there to watch a college football game one time. I know the viewing wasn't the best, so I'm sure you'll get backlash from it. But my point is, maybe think outside the box as far as how many tickets you can sell. Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, no worries. So, yeah, I think, being strategic and not only announcing early, but being strategic and spreading around those knockout phases would be a smart idea. Obviously the West Coast needs to get something, the East Coast needs to get something in the Midwest and spread those out a little bit. But kind of preordaining them of sorts. I think the biggest stumbling block is obviously going to be availability if the Rugby World Cup in 2031 is still planned for the fall. If they decided to host in the summer, well, then I think it changes the complexity a little bit, but we'll see what happens. I want to speak to specifically one of the things, and I hope fans can follow me if they will, but, we're seeing the MLR. The talk is that Canadians are going to be considered internationals now. And I think some Canadians have some pushback, and with all due respect, and I do respect our friends and neighbors to the north, because I think with North American rugby, our fortunes are tied together, if you will, between Rugby Canada and the United States. But I think that this, if it hasn't already, will move the needle and push World Rugby to potentially funnel some funds to do what the anthem is doing. So imagine, if you will, a team coming back to Toronto with a big time support, at least some seed money of support for the Arrows or something like that to return. And now your Canadians have, they have a high performance team to participate in, again, much like the anthem, and they can, train together. The value in that, I think, is that when you have it, it plants a seed for the potential for some parts of the World Cup in 2031 to be hosted in Toronto, so that our friends to the north get some knock-on benefit. But more than that, then it plants a pathway for a bigger feature to be held in Toronto in 2033, where you got to remember we have a very strong women's Rugby Canada team that was just in a final and put England to the test. So, they can really start to build in Canada too, if it's done in a strategic and smart way, and working in conjunction with World Rugby.
Absolutely. I think what you do is you take those pools and you strategically put them in places.
Right.
So that way you can isolate the fans to a section and say, these are the Midwest guys, let's say, this is Pool C is the Midwest, Pool B is this, Pool A is that, and you can strategically place them around international hubs for those people who need to travel internationally, and then the Americans can just go and see whoever they want, and where the Eagles play is the luck of the draw. I think that's
Right.
the easiest and most fair way to do it, because if the Eagles play on the East Coast, everybody's going to bitch on the West Coast and vice versa. So
Right.
I think that's just the easiest way, is you put a group in a specific setting and say, hey, these are the 4 venues they're going to play in, 3 venues they're going to play in, what have you, depending on availability. But that's where you need to go to watch it. We're still going to sell out the Eagles games no matter where you put them in the United States. So, if I don't get to see the Eagles, I don't get to see the Eagles, but at least I'll be able to see a pool play match. You know what I mean?
Right. And hey, speaking of international matches, Scott, big one coming up here in a couple of weeks. I know that you're flying in from New York to come into Chicago for Ireland and the All Blacks on November 1st. So I want to remind fans, if you're going to be in town and you haven't gotten your tickets to Reggies, do so. There's going to be some live acts. I will actually read what is the tentative rundown of the schedule for that day. I believe doors open at 10. So I'm looking right now. Let's see if I can find. Normie sent me a text the other day, and I apologize, fans. I should have had this pulled up already. All right, let's just do a search here. How's that?
It says that it open at 9 a.m. with an all-you-can-eat buffet and plenty of libations. It says live band karaoke, sing with a live band after the match, starting at 3:30.
Yeah, so he sent me a lineup, but I think doors open at 9. Then music and everything starts to happen at 10. And then at noon, we're going on the Rugby Rant Live. We're going to have some guests. I know that TJ Olson's going to be coming in and joining us. There's going to be several other guests. David Fee will be there. He's going to be joining us. And we're going to be talking about the game. We're going to be talking about rugby in the United States, and just, get some folks up on stage, maybe hear a few great stories from rugby travel experiences of old. But Dan and Sheila Falcon are coming in. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're really looking forward to it. Come and join us and then take in the game. If you don't have tickets to the game, they're going to be showing it live at Reggies, so it's not going to be a trip wasted.
That's the best place to watch it, in my opinion. I mean, there's a reason we're doing the show there. You know what I mean, guys? So
100%.
Please come, and even if you're not going to be there for the show, patronize Reggies just for the match. Great food, great drinks. You know where it's at. And honestly, it's a great venue for live music if you're in the Chicagoland area and want to go see some great bands. So let's kind of take the end it here a little bit and just like, what do you think that if you had to pick the number one thing that we could do right now to kind of solidify our position for 2031, as far as not like the Eagles teams, but like for the actual tournament, what we could do here? What's the number one thing we should focus on right now today?
For the actual tournament itself, or are we talking about building blocks that help pave the way for the tournament?
Either one, however you want to interpret that. How about that?
Well, I guess I'd say I'll address each one with its own piece. I think number one, the MLR, as Coach Dammers pointed out, we've got to have a strong domestic league. I don't think that requires a certain number of teams like 13 or 32 or whatever. We can operate from a point of strength with 7 teams, really put our efforts behind building up those 7 teams and building up rugby in those areas from top to bottom, from developmental pathways, into college and into D1, and then obviously into the MLR ranks. So I think that's one thing. And if, we get a team in New York or we get a team in another city that wants to, join in, then all the better in the 6 years time. But I would be cautious about the growth process. The thing about prepping for the tournament is I really think they need to get the timing right in the calendar year, and they need to get the cities established early so that the marketing can be targeted. We know we're going to get fans around the United States that love rugby to travel around the United States, and we know we're going to get international fans that are going to come here because there's some great places to visit regardless of the rugby. But I really think that we need to determine, when is this tournament going to be held? When is it most effective, given that college football and pro football are being played in the fall and going to be using most of the venues that are going to be available for these tournaments. So, when do we do it? Do we do it in the summer? I mean, there's lots of domes that we can put them in, whether it's in New Orleans or whether it's in.
Well, here's the thing. What do you want to compete with? Because if you do it in the fall, you're not only competing with the NFL, you're competing with college football.
Right.
And let's be honest, that's 116 college football teams. That's not 32 of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can go to a Coastal Carolina game, and depending on how they're doing, they're selling out. So, like, what do you want to compete with? I think doing it in the summer, again, strategically, obviously, Miami, probably not a good place to do it in the summer unless you're doing it in a dome. Don't know if they could put a rugby pitch where the Marlins play. That's a question. But, again, I think we could find venues that will be suitable, especially in the Midwest. You might have a hot game or two where you could do it outside if you wanted to. But I think we can find it if we do it in the summer. And I think the only thing you're competing with are the dog days of baseball at that point.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a different game than baseball. It's an entirely different game. And therefore, I think I don't really think it's in direct competition. I think there are enough venues, like I said, with domes. I think the Bears are going to have a dome venue, so it's the weather won't be an issue. You could have a venue in Las Vegas. That's a dome. That won't be an issue. SoFi, is that SoFi or SoFi in LA?
SoFi's in LA.
SoFi's in LA. SoFi in LA is pretty covered. It's a quality dome. I think there are enough of those type of venues that you could spread it around and pretty much avoid real bad heat and weather if you wanted to. So I don't think it's an issue. How you go down to Dallas and have a leg down there inside a Jerry Jones Dome. It's not an issue. So to me, it makes sense.
I mean, Jerry World would just be amazing to have a final in there. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, wouldn't it? Yeah,
I mean, it really would. Talk about Jerry Jones bringing stuff to the people.
Right. And Rick Collins will have a house full then.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll be staying at his house. I'm not sure his new wife would like it, but I don't really care. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
But anyway, I think we're going to continue this kind of theme at some point. But I do think next week we got to talk about R360 because I have some comments I want. And again, it was kind of just Coach brought it up because of the news today in Australia about them telling their players, hey, you want to play internationally, you can't sign a contract with them. But I think we can go through the pros and cons of R360 and what we really think about it next week. But other than that, guys, that is episode 222.
Wow.
I'm the big guy, Scott Ferrara. That's Rob the Hammer Hammerschmidt.
Yep.
See you all next week.
At the next.